Alright, guys, welcome back to the podcast. Welcome back to Tomboy Official. Back. Excuse me, I'm yawning. Back with another episode. It's kind of a late night episode. Saturday night, day 13. Sorry for not posting earlier. I did end up going to a gay bar and gay club last night in Vegas as our final hurrah of a really short trip. Very great trip though, definitely refreshing. My friend understands, needing, midday naps, rest, relaxing, doing stuff, taking breaks between going to bed early, getting back to the hotel early enough to sleep. So yeah, we had a blast at the hotel. I'll get into that more, but yeah, we had a blast. So for day 13, let's just jump into that real quick, and then I'll ramble after. Let's do it that way. So pages. Sorry, I'm trying to count 3 pages here. That's not the pages I read. Oh, okay. So page 40, 41, and 42. So, just to talk about the part that kind of sticks out the most for me, it's kind of when Lily Singh was writing about how different things can impact us. And so she gives the example on the bottom of page 40. She writes, let's say someone writes a comment on my Instagram post that I think is mean. If I were in the same circumstances as that person, I might have written the same comment. And she goes on to give examples, why people might go to certain lengths to do something that is hurtful. And so, we've talked about it before that, there's a range, right? Like, I think we all kind of have our limits. I think we all know that not every single person we come across is going to be perfect or do things right or make us happy or do things the way we expect, right? Like, there is still that room for error, but how much error, right? How severe the error, and how frequently it's going on. Like, there are certain people that I tell things to that they know bothers me, and I tell them that certain things about them, I just don't have the energy to deal with it, or it kind of gets in my way in some way or another. And sometimes those people just can't stop doing those things. And depending on what the thing is, I kind of have my limits. Some things I'm just like, okay, this person is just going to do this. It's going to be obnoxious and annoying. And I'm not going to get any real relief from it other than just making sure I'm not contacting them, basically, or in touch with them in a way that can happen. Like, sometimes it's like I have to fully limit myself from people. Not a lot of people. There's probably like a couple people like that, but sometimes with certain people, with the circumstance, like if it's someone who, for example, only contacts me when they're not sober and at late hours, and say like I'm trying to like work on my sleep patterns and all that kind of stuff. It's like, okay, if I tell them, hey, I sleep by this time, I start unwinding by this time, I don't want to be talking on the phone or to anybody or having to, mess around with, you know, late night conversations. Like, I kind of want my end of night to be my own special time, And, if they keep calling and calling, like, it's not like my phone is on and it's bothering me, Like, I keep my phone so that it's, like, there's certain people who can get by, when it's, like, in sleep mode or do not disturb or whatever. There's certain people that I've put that if I do turn my phone volume on, which is always off and it's always not even on vibrate. So basically, unless I literally pick up my phone and look at it, usually I don't see or hear any calls. And usually when I'm not on my phone, I keep it face down. So if it's a situation like that, like they can call all they want late at night. Like it's not really going to affect me. I'm not going to know unless I look at my phone late at night and see it. And then I usually won't pick up unless I really want to talk to them and I'm going to be up late and I'm like, whatever. That's just a simple, silly example that's like, okay. And especially if like, if the person's calling me and they're so like inebriated that they're like drunk calling me or something, and it's like, can't we just talk at a normal hour when we're both sober in the middle of the week or something and actually catch up in a way that like is quality? Because I feel like that person doesn't really actually remember anything too good, or not only are their memories kind of faulty, but they try to make plans while they're under the influence, and then like you know it's always like dreaming. It's like dreaming plans. It's like I can tell now because I know this person well that like whenever this is happening, late night calls, drunk on the phone, these plans that we're talking about, it would be nice if it happened, but I know like 99% of the time they're not even going to remember that they said it. They don't have a game plan on how to execute this. Just things like that, right? So it's like that's a simple example of just like something that can be like casually obnoxious that, on a bad day, I'm like, oh my gosh, like they're calling me, but it's like the ball is totally in my court. If I don't answer the phone, like they're usually in like a happy kind of like mood because they're inebriated and, you know, they just want to chatter and, like sometimes it's fun, but then I'm like, we're not really catching up. You don't remember anything I told you. What's the point of this conversation other than, hey, you have somebody to call and it's fun for you when you're drinking, but, if I'm actually in a serious mode or have a lot going on, those aren't really the kind of calls that I find of, like, quality that I actually want to talk to someone like that. It just gets to be annoying, and sometimes trying to get off the phone, it's like they don't want to get off the phone when I'm like, hey, I gotta go, it's late, I'm trying to sleep. I just wanted to talk like 20, like you can't even have like a 20-30 minute conversation and they want to stay on the phone for like 90 minutes or something, and it's like, dude, like, so things like that where, where people call like, I mean, I like it, I appreciate it, it's fun, I like that, oh, they thought of me, to call and like they want to catch up, but, I would prefer to catch up, you know, sober and actually catch up, like legit catch up, and I feel like it doesn't have to be even completely sober, but like sober enough that like somebody remembers, what the conversation was, so that when we do talk the next time, we're like following up versus like, oh, the last 3 times we talked over the last, I don't know, 3 months, were completely like drunken conversations, and you know the memory for that conversation is just not even there or solid, and then I'm just like, okay, like you don't even remember what I was saying, like I told you what I was doing with maybe like this class or with work or with my health or whatever, and like they don't remember. So that kind of thing is like, it's an example, like a probably silly example of just like a low level issue. Like that's not an issue, right? It's like it's something that's like somebody does that I can easily tell them, hey, why don't we talk, I'll text them back and just be like, hey, like, tomorrow's Sunday, like, let's talk around, like, after breakfast. But I know they're not going to wake up. And then it's like, or let's talk after lunch. And, they're not going to respond when I call or whatever. So it's kind of like that. It's like, well, if you're not going to respond when I call, when I'm available, when I want to talk, when you're actually, sober enough to like hold the conversation and like remember the conversation, and that's kind of the quality of conversation I'd want. And they don't really seem to want that, then I don't really have to like bend over backwards necessarily. Like, I'm not trying to sound like a jerk. It's just like there's a difference between kind of like being a pushover and um being a pushover and sticking up for yourself. Like, I don't know, like, this is an idea that I play with. Like, again, I'm not one to like blame people who are being victimized, but at the same time, I was given an example of something that used to happen, that does happen in my life still, but used to happen, right? So, um, I've had experiences where, I'm pretty social. I get out there, especially certain periods of time. I'm pretty sociable. I get out. I go, meet people, new people, same people, old friends, new friends, and, events, stuff like that. Like groups of people that, we do stuff together or whatever. And, you know, when I'm social, I notice that, sometimes if it's not that perfect combo, like sometimes it has to be that perfect combo, right? It's like you slept well, you're well fed, you're motivated for whatever the event of that time period is, and you're all like gung ho and like, yes, let's go, let's do this, and everybody's happy, everyone's in a good mood, right? Versus, you know, everybody's kind of like grumpy and grouchy, and there's a little bit of stuff happening here or there with people getting on each other's nerves or whatever, and maybe it's an okay thing, maybe it's not. Um, so there can be that, and there can also be, um, um, I don't know. There can also be um, like, I guess the I guess the idea that I play with that I haven't figured out yet is, you know, I grew up with the whole, turn the other cheek kind of mentality. Not let people walk all over you, but turn the other cheek. Like, don't retaliate, right? Um, so, in my mind, for me to not really retaliate or want to be just like mean to somebody who's getting on my nerves or being rude to somebody who's being obnoxious, for me, I find it appropriate to tell people how I feel about things. Like, I know maybe that's annoying to other people, and they say, okay, you're being too direct. I don't know, either that or whatever, but I really find it um, interesting that, at least in my life, and I think a lot of people are like this, you can have an experience where you're like, so and so keeps so and so keeps making me pick up the tab. So and so keeps coming to our, maybe we have a Wednesday weekly lunch. So and so comes to the weekly Wednesday lunch and always asks me to pay, but never pays me back, right? So what are your options in those situations, right? Say if it's a person who's like, going out to eat is expensive nowadays, right? So say you're out with a person who's a heavy drinker, who's a friend of yours. You guys go out, maybe you meet other friends, but every single time you go out, they're like, hey, like, I'll Venmo you, just like pick this up, It's like, cool. And so usually that's a simple thing, right? Like, usually nobody's gonna be like, oh, like, I don't have the money or whatever. Like, usually it's a simple thing. But, um, one thing that I notice is that sometimes people will um, notice that, they get upset about something because they're giving into it. Like, I'm not saying a person's being victimized or abused and, it's their fault. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying if you think of an example like that with like a simple, like, go out to eat, maybe have some drinks, right? You can even make the situation even a little more extreme where it's like, okay, I go out, I get like an appetizer and one Corona, right? That's gonna be way cheaper than if I'm out with somebody who, gets a bottle of champagne for like $50 a bottle. I don't even know how much they cost. Say they're 50 to $100 a bottle, as well as, getting like, ultimate all you can eat nachos for $30 or some ridiculous thing. It's like, and you want me to pay like 80 to $130 and not pay me back? Like, if I noticed a pattern like that, like, my options would be either, okay, the kind of like, fool me once, shame on me, fool you twice, or kind of thing. Um, or fool you once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me, right? It's kind of like, once you notice it's a pattern, then it's like, I think, there's an option to speak up, and that's kind of usually where I am like, okay, let's, like, I'm not into cutting people off or ghosting people and all that. I'm like, I'll give people chances, right? So I'm usually like, if it was a situation like that where it's like, okay, it happened once, they didn't pay me back, I would be a little, I mean, with that amount of money, I'd probably be a little like ill. Like, that's a lot of money to just like say you're gonna pay and not pay it, right? And then the second thing would be, um, um, you know, um, send them a Venmo request, like they would know, right? But say you go out the second Wednesday, right? Second Wednesday, friend hang out, and they start ordering the same thing and do the same thing, and they're like, hey, pick up, pick up both of our bills. You have the option to say no. You can be like, no, I just brought enough for me. I don't, I'm only using this card, for, or whatever. You don't even have to make an excuse or lie. You can just be like, no, I'm only going to pay for my own stuff, you know. You don't have to give excuses. Like, usually I tell people, I'm not saying this happens a lot, but usually in those situations, I'm usually like, you know, um, I haven't really done my budget yet, so, I'm just keeping track of every cent at the moment, so I'm just gonna pay for this on my own or whatever. Like, it's awkward to tell people no, but I feel like when it's like an excessive thing too, that's not cool. And um, I know things get expensive, but it's like sometimes even when it's like when you're with people and they're like, oh, let's split the bill, and you see like, you order the cheapest thing on the menu and just a water that's free versus you ordering something, like everybody else ordering like extra like seafood, expensive stuff on top of like multiple drinks. It's like, why should I have to split the bill with that? You know what I mean? Um, so sometimes it's just better to do that. Or if you're going out, just bring cash. I've done that multiple times. Just been like, I know I'm going out. It's annoying to have to go by an ATM or whatever, but it's like sometimes it'll save the complete hassle. If I have like $60 in my wallet, it's easy to get change from a restaurant when you're in the restaurant eating, And, usually $60 will definitely get me through. Like, I'm not gonna spend more than that usually in one day, unless it's like really excessive. Um, like for example, last night, I went to Piranha, this gay club with some friends. I willingly paid the cover fee. It was $40 for three of us. I'm not sure. I think if you're not from there, it costs more. So, because I was like, I don't know how three people equals $40. That's kind of a weird price. Um, but I mean, I paid because I had other people kind of paying for my stuff a little bit, um, at a time. So, one of my friends paid on Thursday night. We got dinner and they paid for dinner. And then, so on Friday, for lunch, I paid for lunch, you know. And then I paid for the bill on that too. Um, and that's just an example, though. It's like I feel like it's completely appropriate if you're upset with something to be able to voice it and try to problem solve. But I feel like a lot of people don't want to do that and they don't like it. They get offended. I mean, of course, the tone and how it's brought up and all that, like, shaming people in like a group full of people or anything along those lines isn't okay. I don't think, but it's like, also, it's like, sometimes people know they're getting over on a situation, like I've been in situations with people just like waiting for me to pay for stuff, you know. Like I mentioned it before, I used to have some people who used to mooch off of me when I would give them rides like to and from this church, and we would go to these Monday night Bible studies. And one night, it was like all the way in Garden Grove, and I was picking them up in like other areas and stuff. And I remember once the lady who hosted the Bible study, she was like, "Oh, are you guys coming?" And I was like, "I'd love to make it, but like I don't have the money for the gas to be driving all these people around," because I was like on a really tight budget because I wasn't working full time, and these guys weren't working at all and never pitched in for gas, and none of them lived anywhere near me. And so I was like, Monday's becoming an extra burden because like it's something I don't necessarily have to go to. um so she gave me $20 for gas. So after this Bible study and food thing, uh she hands me $20, and then the other people were like, "Oh, we can pitch in for your gas, we can pitch in," like the ones who were riding with me, who for months, maybe even a year or two, or I don't know if it was a year or two, but for multiple months at least, like they had never pitched in for gas even once. And so I was kind of just like, okay, like I see how you guys are. Um, but they never pitched in for gas. And I was just like, even the whole time, even after they saw that lady pay, they didn't offer to pay once I got to the gas station. I saw these people at least once a week, if not 2 to 3 times a week, Friday, Saturday, Monday, you know, um, and it was a burden. It was definitely a burden, but I definitely felt stuck. But I also knew that once I was leaving to San Diego, I wouldn't be giving them rides anymore. So that was kind of my thing where I was just like, okay, well, I'm leaving anyway, so I was kind of trying to do it as community service, but I was also struggling myself. But I was like, well, I have a car, and they don't even have a car. And, I do go out and like hang out with other people and stuff too. So I was like willingly like inviting them into the circle of people to like hang out, and then I take them home late or whatever. Um, but then other friends started pitching in to do the driving too. Um, and I don't know, it was a burden, but it was also like, I learned, it was a lesson learned for sure. And that wasn't the first time. That was probably the second time I had people in my life like that. Um, people who almost never pay like anything. Like I had someone once that I knew that I, you know, told them, I'll just give me $1 every time I give you a ride, because that was still under the amount that, I was paying in gas to go from my house to their house to the whatever the event was, back to their house, and then back to my house. It was more than $1 to do that. Um, and and that was, again, like giving them rides multiple times a week. I was like, you can at least pay me what you would have been paying in bus fare. Like that, I feel like is at least fair. Like if you have a $30 bus pass a month, or if you're paying like a buck something or whatever per bus ride, or a couple bucks, for with the transfer or whatever it is, like give me that money if I'm the one driving you. It's like, you're still getting there faster, or even give me half of the amount. It's like, but for people to just completely free, do all that, expect people to do stuff for them, especially in this day and age with things as pricey as they are. I don't think anybody wants money coming between their relationships. And it's kind of a common one, though. I've seen it happen to a lot of people that, don't really pay attention to their spending when they go out, and they're just kind of like everybody else is buying stuff for them, or they buy stuff for themselves, but they never buy anything for anyone else. And they're not willing to like pay their end of the bill. So, there's that. And yeah, but I guess the struggle is, you don't want to be mean, you don't want to be a jerk, you don't want to have other people get offended and be like, this cheap person is like telling me to pay for my part of like the Venmo, or Venmo is pestering me to Venmo them. And it's like, dude, like if they owe you like, I don't remember what the number was that I said, like 130 or something like that, and it's like every week and they're not paying it, it's like, come on. And like, and even if it's like $20, I mean, it's your $20, like, that adds up over time, especially if it's every week. But it is kind of frustrating when it's like, okay, that might be one problem with one person, there might be other little issues with other situations, and if a person never really says anything about it, other people aren't going to guess. They're not going to guess that this is inappropriate, that this is not nice. Now, it's different if you offer, right? I feel like in that scenario, it would be different if I was like, oh, I'll pay for it, and then just like expect everybody to pay me back. That's not how that's usually going to work. Like if there's no plan in advance, like usually you can expect that people aren't going to pay you. But yeah, usually something as simple as that, like I know that amount is excessive. I don't really know that many people who are going to be spending like over $100 on a random Wednesday every week. But when you buy drinks and stuff, it adds up. And I don't know if people realize, how big the bill is when somebody's paying for two bills at once. It's like I can easily spend, on an Uber delivery, I can easily spend like 25, like somewhere between $22 and $28 just with the fees and then the tip. If the tip is like 15 to 20%, and all that, right? And then say you go in a restaurant, say you even go just to Subway, right? Say you go to like a simple Subway. 1 foot long is going to be near $10, right? Same with like a Big Mac meal. I think they're a little cheaper than $10 now. maybe like $8-9 for like a couple cheeseburger meal at McDonald's, right? Or you go into a restaurant. Usually, if you see a dish for like $12 or so, usually I add 30% to that. I usually add 30% to that because I expect tax is going to be like almost 10% in California. It's not 10%, it's less. It's like 8 or 9 something percent, but it's almost 10%. Like rounding up is just easier. So if I get a meal for $12, right? And then plus 30%, um, sorry, plus 30%, um, that's $1.20 times 3. Because $1.20 is 10%, and then another 10%, and another 10%. So it's an extra $3.60. Add that to your 12, that's $15.60. Like if you wanted to be like an over tipper, and tip a little more than, tip like 22, 23% or so, or 22 or so percent, that's $15.60 for one meal. So if you get two $12 meals with 30% added to that, that's already over $30. That's like 31 something. And so even if you tip less, even if you only tip 15%, you know, that's still a lot of money. Like, so, for two people, like something that would cost you $15.60 now costs you 31 something, right? And if that's every week, you know, that adds up, But yeah, I mean, like, I usually have been taking the stance that, I think it's fine when I notice that there's like a pattern that I can't really, that I'm not really too cool with, that's getting in my way. Then, if it's getting in my way, I don't see any reason why I should have to never say anything. I try to be nice. I mean, people are going to get offended if they're going to get offended. That's not my fault if they choose to assume that I mean something negative. And it's not easy to do, but, like, I think that's something that comes up a lot in social settings. Just that kind of conundrum to be like, should I say something and actually, should I actually say something and risk some kind of like, I don't want to call it retaliation. I don't think most people are that extreme, but I mean, risk some kind of like negative impact of addressing the situation, or do I let it just continue and complain to everybody else or vent to other people that, oh, I hate this situation, I can't believe they're taking advantage? Because I feel like that's what most people do, myself included. Like, I usually go through a period of time where I'm like, this situation sucks, I hate that this person is doing this. Like, I'm not like spreading it to everybody, but I have trusted people that I can talk to that, usually I don't even use like names or anything like that, but it's kind of like, like sometimes it's like, man, like I don't want to be involved, like I don't want to be involved with somebody, who's doing all those types of things on a regular basis, and I feel like I can't even talk to them about it. It's like, it's not a fun position to be in. But I think that's one method of kind of like resolving things when something is getting in the way, is to actually try to problem solve it, because sometimes people can actually, pay attention and try harder, other times they just can't really hit the mark. And then it's like deciding, okay, how much do I put up with at a certain point, And what are my options when I don't want to deal with it anymore? Or if I ever get to a point where I don't want to deal with it anymore. So, and I think money is one of those things that gets a little tricky. Like, even if it's like $5, $20, people will hold grudges, for having to pay for somebody's dinner, you know, for like a long time. Uh, so it's kind of, it gets a little tricky. And a lot of the stuff with like, oh, Venmo me or whatever, um, gets a little tricky. And some people are generous, I think it's fine if you want to treat people and buy them stuff or whatever. That's always nice. It's always fun to be able to do it. And sometimes it's like there is that give and take in relationships. There's like people who they'll pay. Like usually, like I have kind of like an unspoken with quite a few friends that it's like they'll pay for something, and then I'll just kind of like remember that they paid for something and try to do like an equivalent payment, but maybe not like right away. So if I don't Venmo them back, I'll usually try to be like, oh, I'm just gonna try to, pay for something else, um, something different, and so um, that kind of thing. So, and I've had other friends that are like really nice about paying for stuff, which is kind of them, but yeah, it's kind of it can be a little weird too. But yeah, I've never really um really tried to articulate that too well. Um but it's definitely something that I notice, and I'm not like bitter or anything. But I feel like the more a person socializes, the more you kind of come up across like different kind of things, and depending on what you're dealing with in your own life, sometimes you don't have any wiggle room or energy to deal with other people's stuff that they've got going on. And other times you do. So, um, yeah, I mean, it's an individual choice, but I always think, like when I'm feeling really annoyed and it's getting to me to a point where I'm just like, I start getting a little bitter towards somebody, then I'm like, okay, time to address this thing, the elephant in the room. Um, but some people really can't, they're not very self aware, and they just don't learn how to do things a way that somebody else needs them to do it, or they have some other kind of emotional imbalance of some form that keeps them from being able to stop, doing things. Um, there's something that's weird too that I've noticed with people who just aren't nice. Like sometimes I think people don't pay attention to their caffeine intake and how it affects. I mean, it sounds stupid, but sometimes people don't pay attention to how certain things make them react. So caffeine, I know for me, I I can be chipper and, usually kind of more happy go lucky when I have something like yerba mate. But when I have something like coffee, it's a little bit of a different effect. And it's like, especially once the coffee starts to wear off, I can be irritable. The other day I had some coffee and I had a headache for like hours. So it's like hard to like pay attention to my tone when I'm talking. Versus when I have something like CBD with a little bit of THC in it or something. Like I'll usually be pretty chill and friendly. But I'm not like hyped up. I'm just kind of like mellow. So different types of things that we even just like ingest uh, simply can affect us, as well as being low on calories, like not having regular meals. Some people eat like one meal a day, and they'll be all like pissy and bitter throughout the day. And it's like, bro, like eat a candy bar, like chill, you know. So some people will have that as an issue. Other people, you know, have like, you know, times of the day, you know, where they're tense, you know, like for whatever reason it may be. They might have like unmanaged or unknown like hypertension, like even maybe like a mild version of it that makes them kind of react kind of like a jerk and just kind of like not very nice. But yeah, like that's not uncommon to come across people just um who do like certain things. Like I'm not making excuses for people who act like jerks, but I'm just saying sometimes there are little things that people just aren't aware of or that they don't manage on their own that makes them react a certain way and that gets to everybody else, you know. And so just paying attention to that, noticing it, knowing about it, um, that can help. Um, and yeah, so I'm gonna try to post this before midnight because it's coming up in like 6 minutes. I'm gonna post a separate episode just after midnight, just about the Vegas trip. So I can talk more in detail about that because I feel like I can't really just talk about it all in here. I don't think I can get done talking about it in like 6 minutes. So, alright. So I'm gonna log off here, and I think that's all for day 13. Thanks for listening. You know, man.